This is WPSL Port St. Lucie, the talk of the Treasure Coast.
Following is a paid program. The content is provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership are not responsible for the content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. And now, the host of the Team Martek Hour, Joe Martek.
Guess what? I just got the finger from the station owner's husband. Again, whoop, different digit. Careful now. 340-1590, 340-1590. I am Joe Martek, and this is the Team Martek Hour. And luckily, guest member Alan Love, retired prosecuting attorney from Wisconsin, showed up. Kind of right. I'll tell you, got it, Alan, I'm really impressed. You timed it almost to the second before you, when you actually hit the chair, you know, but that was pretty good. What? Come on, no comment.
No. Cliff was just whispering nice things in my ear, so.
Well, you can't trust Cliff. I'm telling you right, and he whispers in everybody's ear. 340-1590, 340-1590. Back in 2004, Joe Martek, financial advisor, Dan Warren, independent insurance agent, and Greg Fasula, attorney, started doing radio shows with the purpose of answering questions for people because each had a different area of expertise. And we never dreamed in a million years that 15 years later we'd still be doing the shows. But we also have added...
Music to the show. How about that?
We have added... Since then, Ms. Victoria Loyd, Remax of Stewart, because the Great Recession basically taught us that real estate became a major subject.
Turn your cell phones off.
And I'm trying to find, first I got to put my glasses on to be able to see it. You know, Greg.
What are you doing over there?
If you were a good producer, you would have me prepped properly for this show. But as it is, your wife has not trained you very well. Of course, not that I know that you're trainable at all, but what can I tell you? So then, after we hired Miss Victoria Loyd, who's on her way, by the way, you know, Alan, you got to give her credit. She always shows. But, oh, Lord, guess what?
Whoa.
Another attorney. We get two. Where's your son? I thought you were going to bring him in.
He's sleeping.
He's sleeping.
You know how that goes.
Wait, teenagers know how to sleep.
Yeah,
The
11,
day doesn't start till midnight when you're a kid.
That's about it.
Yeah.
That's true.
Greg, now come on. Do you remember?
Oh, I do remember.
We used to go out, we'd dance and carry on, and then we'd close the bar. And then at 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd go to have breakfast. You did.
Who did?
They didn't have bars in California.
I went to a Jesuit school, man.
Oh, then you never left the bar.
We didn't. And it wasn't even a co-ed school. It was a guy's school.
That's why you had to sneak over to the girls' school.
Well, we had 6 girls' colleges in L.A.
You notice how he's smiling all of a sudden?
Yeah,
the memories are coming back. Carol's not here to catch him smiling.
I noticed. But no, those 5 a.m. Denny's trips.
Yeah,
I remember those.
Well, that was, it's all, there's like it's part of getting, well, I guess what I'm trying to say is if you survive those things, you don't die, all of a sudden you realize you can't do that anymore.
Can't do it anymore.
And then there's
no
another
way.
thing that happens. You might
No
remember
way.
this one. You get married. And they don't let you do that anymore.
That puts a damper on
it.
Although it never stopped Joe.
Well, that's why I'm not married.
Exactly.
So anyway, I was saying that we started these shows back in '04. You, Dan Warren, and Joe Martek, with the concept of answering questions for people that might have different areas of expertise. Greg Fasula, attorney. I had, And then I was leading into Mike Paulus, the last member here, in which I just got sidetracked for a second because you walked in the door.
Yep.
Who
Mike.
has just done a magnificent job educating people on what is available in the mortgage business.
Right.
I've had two interesting conversations. One pretty much is in your bailiwick. I had a lady call from Port St. Lucie who has a house. Her mom owns the house. So mom put her on the deed.
Okay.
And she also has another house in Pennsylvania that is her homestead.
Okay.
So she says, the people down here said, I've got to get rid of the Pennsylvania homestead in order to keep the Florida homestead.
Well, sure, you can't have more than one.
That's it.
Yeah.
So I said, well, here's the rule. You have to have lived in that other house for 2 of the last 5 years in order to have a tax wonderful problem, meaning, Greg, and you probably know this, you buy your house for $100,000, you sell it later on for $300,000, there's no tax. But
Right.
you have to have lived in that house 2 of the last 5 years
Okay.
in order to have that tax-free exemption.
Right.
Got it?
If I move back to L.A.,
Right?
can I homestead my tent?
You know, I don't know if you can afford to live in a tent in L.A. unless you live with the 60,000
$60,000 at L.A. Civic Center. Yeah,
they have some nice new tents. I was watching.
they
on
are
the tube.
nice tents. Yeah,
Is the city providing them with the tents, or?
they now have they're now saying that there's 2 million rats in downtown Los Angeles. Now that does not count the city council.
I was just going to say there are exemptions, right? That's 2,014,000
and
now.
the mayor.
Well, you know,
Oh,
I
it's
guess there's a
awful.
lot of food there for them.
It's
for the
awful.
rats.
It is just awful.
well,
They're cleaning up.
man's inhumanity to man, and every time I see a commercial to save this, or let's do the whales, or let's explore space, I start thinking about all of the people in this globe that need help.
Yep.
And I
Yeah.
just have a hard time. Anyway, it doesn't sit well with me.
So you must be becoming a liberal.
Well, there are, you know, in spite of the fact that I am a conservative, there are a couple of parts of me that are somewhat liberal, and that's
Yep.
one.
Yeah.
The other one is, and it becomes a monster subject now that is really the conservatives are 1,000% against, and that's Medicare for everyone, which I've been in favor of since day one.
For over 10 years, you've been talking
Yeah,
about
we've been
this.
talking
For
about that for quite a while.
forever. Well, the concept to me is it's discrimination. You can be 64 and 11 months and 28 days. Go ahead and die. You have no health insurance.
Yeah.
But 2 days later, you have Medicare. Bam! All of a sudden, you've got a $1,000 or $800 deductible for the hospital,
Yeah.
and you got 80% of the bill paid. And all they do is take $130 a month out of your Social Security check, and if you get an HMO or a PPO, you may not even pay that $130.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
it makes sense.
How is this fair? Well, then they come up and say, well, where are you going to find the money? Well, I did a minor study on this. I mean, just a minor study. That Medicare spends about $9,000 to $10,000 per inmate per year in America. Now, understand this, that the vast majority of these people are 65 and over. The ones that are under 65 that get on Medicare are in extreme health problems.
Yeah.
They qualify for it. So this is the high-cost group. High-cost group.
Right.
Now, if it's $10,000 a year, that's $800 a month at a cost per person for Medicare. Well, if all of a sudden Greg Fasula was on it, we could throw him in there, and he'd bring the cost down to $897 instead of $899 because he's younger and his health demands are less. And then if we bring Greg's son in, who's 18 or 19,
Right.
it'd bring it down even. My whole thing is there has not been a comprehensive study that I can find that would actually say what would it really cost per
Right.
capita in America to have everybody on it. And I guess they would have to have some kind of proof for everybody to be on it. One of the
Well, I'll
things.
tell you, if you could just cut out all those mailings that Medicare sends out twice a month or whatever it is,
It isn't just Medicare.
you'd save millions.
Well, you know,
Absolute
in
millions.
defense of like Humana, they constantly are calling, doing all kinds of stuff because the government says in order for them to keep their rating, they have to take care of their people. So it used to be that, hey, Medicare would pay Humana $8,000 or $10,000 or $6,000 a year, whatever the dollar figure is, and if people didn't get sick, Humana's happy. Well, all of a sudden, people are getting sick, and Humana's going to lose money, so they want to keep you healthy. So they bug you to stay healthy.
Sure.
All good news. All good news. So if anybody has ever done or even heard of one, I would love to see a comprehensive study to what it would really, legitimately, objectively. Boy, this is tough, Greg. Objectivity in America.
Right.
Boy, this is tough.
No, you would think it'd be doable if they did it, but because of the pressures by the insurance companies and the healthcare providers.
Stay with the healthcare insurance companies. Guess what they would do? They would still be selling supplements to everybody.
You betcha.
They would still be doing HMOs and PPOs.
Exactly.
You do eliminate a good portion of the underage healthcare insurance companies, but they
and
don't.
if you bring up the taxes, the payroll taxes, just a little bit, you'll be able to pay for that.
You'd be able to pay for it, and people would be paying a lot less than what they pay now for their premiums.
Well, of course they would. And I look all over the world for these people in America. Oh, you can't have health care. Look at this system's no good and that system's no good. But studies done outside of America show us about number 36 or 7 in the world as far as health care. Whereas countries that are extremely expensive, like Norway and Denmark and even Italy, I had a magnificent experience in France years ago. I'm over it.
What was her name?
Yes. Ex-wife and I, she was not ex-wife at the time, were in France in a little town called Arles, don't speak any French. She had contact dermatitis, and the only thing that would knock it out was prednisone. So before we left, I said, make sure you get a prescription of prednisone in case it comes up. Now, in her head, it was never going to come up again each time it went away. So, of course, she didn't get the prescription. So here we are, and she was hiding, but she finally showed me her hands, which were bleeding. And I said, this should be interesting. We don't speak any French. So I went downstairs and spoke to the person at the desk who didn't understand a word I'm saying. And there was a pharmacy across the street. Now, you'll like this, Greg. In French, pharmacy is pharmacia. Now, even I could figure it out that was...
You can figure that one out?
I could figure that out.
Impressive.
So I go into the pharmacy, and I take my wife with me. We walk in the door, and I know the words for, what the world are you doing here? Pourquoi? And I held out her hand and to this person in the pharmacy, and I said, prednisone. And she goes, no, Dr. Medellin. And I said, okay, Dr. Medellin. She points out the door and gets rid of us. Now, it's like a New Yorker. They point out the door and get rid of you. You have no clue where you're going, but you're going.
Just going. You're going out the door.
We're going out the door. So we're walking down the street. No idea. And then I walk into this little dress shop. The little dress shop, Greg, is probably 4 times as big as this office right here. And there's 3 women standing in there all chatting. And I look at one of them and I say, Dr. Medellin, back again, pourquoi?
Right.
And I said, globed my wife's hand out like this, held it out, and the woman goes, gasps, and grabs a hold of her, and out the door they go. And I'm trotting behind like the puppy, and they're walking down this street, about 6 or 7 doors, open up this steel door with all cement. If we were in any city in America, you're dead. And we walk up 3 flights of stairs with 1 single light bulb at the top, go into another door, and in the door is a 6x8 reception area, and there's 3 people standing there, and this woman knocks on the door, says something, tells us to sit, and about 10 minutes later, a doctor comes out who spoke perfect English.
Doesn't sound like our typical doctor's office.
Doesn't sound like our typical doctor's office.
No.
And so I go in and talk to him. He spends 20 minutes with us. They don't have prednisone in France. It's a steroid, but they have a cross-reference directory.
Okay.
So he spends about 20 minutes with us, and he writes 3 prescriptions. And across the street is another pharmacia. So I said, okay, how much do I owe you? And he charged me the big bucks, $20.
20 big ones.
20 big ones.
See the doctor.
And he's a doctor.
Yeah.
So I go across the street to the pharmacia with the 3 prescriptions, and they charge me the big bucks for all 3.
About $5 or
25 for all 3.
Yeah.
And my only experience with a nationalized healthcare program was fantastic. Period.
Yeah.
But that was just my personal one. So
Yeah, and you know, I've met a lot of Canadians, and you hear people put down the Canadian healthcare system in the U.S. They tell me they would not want to lose it. Canadians that are considering being a U.S. citizen, they say, I'd love to be a U.S. citizen, but I don't want to lose my benefits in Canada.
And I've heard the same thing. They come down, they say, I've got to go back. And I say, why do you have to go back? Because if I stay too long, I lose my Canadian benefits. So I've got it's like a 6-month window or whatever it might be.
Right.
And I said, well, how bad would that be? He says, can't afford to take the chance. And that's it.
Yeah.
Now,
no, it is a chance. Health is a chance. It's a risk.
Yeah.
You never know.
So the concept of Medicare for everybody, even though it's footballed like crazy, and there's going to be all kinds of alternatives to it, and still are, I'm having a hard. I again wish somebody would do an objective study that basically look at this.
Hi.
And a realtor showed up.
Yes. How is everybody?
Ms. Victoria Loyd, who did call and say you were running late.
And I was.
And you were, and am. And
And
Greg was late too, but he doesn't call.
I was
You
like
don't call?
2 minutes late.
You know, there's a difference between the woman and the man. It's like the man gets a phone call and says, oh, so-and-so's coming over. And I said, oh, great. Are they coming with anybody? When are they coming? What time? I don't know. They're just coming over. A woman say, oh, are you coming alone? What time will you be here? Can I get something for you to eat or drink? And, men just say, oh, they're just going to show up.
And your point is?
Yeah.
I mean, it's called.
One or the two is either screwed on tight or too loose.
Well,
and I haven't decided which one
and
yet.
I've got to admit, you're 100% right, because I can't tell you how many times. Well, what'd they say? And I said, they said they're coming over. Well,
See?
what are
Told
they
ya.
doing? I said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, okay, you're coming over. Right?
Well, I guess it's a woman that tries to accommodate a little bit to say, hey, Joe's coming over. So
Well,
is he
first of
coming
all-
with Barb,
first-
Sue, Mary,
First of all, what
Joanne?
they should do
Ellen?
if they're dropping over, they should bring something.
But they don't.
But
I do.
Now, wait a minute. If it's a woman dropping over, she'll bring something.
Absolutely.
But a man, he
Brings a woman.
He may say
He usually brings his appetite.
he may say
His appetite,
he
I love
brings
it.
his appetite, or he may say, how much beer do you have left?
Right.
Not you. You'd say scotch.
Well, of course. But point
So
is,
why did you say beer?
well, not everybody drinks scotch.
Yeah, but would
When
you
people
say that
coming
most
to my
people drink
house, they
beer?
might say, Joe, do you have any beer left? My brother, he would never come over without finding out ahead of time if I had whiskey or beer.
Well, because that's his chaser.
I know.
He doesn't chase her.
So if he doesn't have any, he's got to get some on the way.
Isn't it scary that I know all these things?
Well, Vic, we've only known each other for 400 years.
I know, maybe
There's
401.
never been a secret here any place.
No.
First, Victoria can't keep a secret.
That's true.
That's
And,
the
you know,
easy-
when people say, "Are you Victoria's Secret?" I said, "I don't have any secrets. What do you want to know?"
Yeah, and it's like and I've said this 1,000 times to people. Joe, can you keep a secret? No.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to tell you. Good. Don't tell me anything
Good
that
idea.
you don't want anybody else to know.
Well, it's kind of hard. Sometimes you forget.
May I ask a question, please?
You're going to anyway.
Are you going to sometime during this hour talk about investments or
No.
trust and estates or real estate?
No.
I started off with a subject before we were rudely interrupted by a realtor, and
You were talking about this, the lady that had property in Pennsylvania.
she had
Yeah.
property in Pennsylvania and a house here. And the first thing I said was, so your mom put you on the house here. Let me just tell you the problems you've got immediately. One, if you're living there, it can be homesteaded. You can't have another homestead. You already know that,
Right.
so you can do that. However, you have a tax problem on the way, because if mom paid $100,000 for the house and she dies and you sell it for $300, and there's going to
You've
be
got
a
a big
gain
capital
of
gain.
$200 that is subject to tax.
Right.
And I said, now, on the other hand, if you have a reason for doing that, I understand, and there was a reason, which is not important to go into, as long as you know that you have a potential problem down the road. Now, if you plan on living there the rest of your life, and the kids inherit it and they have a tax problem, that's a different story. But the point I'm trying to say is it could be a potential tax problem. Second thing was, I said, the house you have in Pennsylvania, you had to have lived there for 2 of the last 5 years so that you don't have a tax problem when you sell it. And she said, I'm right on the line. I said, well, then you better sell it now so that you don't have to pay a taint. And she got lucky. In Allentown, Pennsylvania is where she is. They just opened a new arena or whatever, and her house is a row house, which had low value until they opened up this arena, which has now employed 1,000 people and created all kinds.
Neighborhood?
Yeah, the neighborhood is improved.
Good.
So good for her. Anyway, the concept of something like that, Greg, it's the average person just doesn't think about it, of the tax consequences and the potential for lawsuit.
Right.
Well, doesn't it have to
I
be
agree.
done like 5 years prior or something to the death? I mean, for some of the situations. So if you want to disinherit somebody, yes. Doesn't it have to be 5 years prior?
Now you're talking about
Not
Medicaid
necessarily.
rules.
No,
Yeah.
no, not Medicaid.
No.
No.
What are you talking about? Do you
no.
know?
Yes, I do.
Well, give me a clue.
Well, it's just like, okay, so let's say you have a mother and a father, and the mother gets sick.
Yeah.
And so, but she's not, she's not in a nursing home yet, but she's gonna. So if you, now it's 5 years, it used to be 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
So let's say you
Medicaid.
disinherit her and you
are
take
talking,
her off.
You are talking
So it is
Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Yeah.
It is
Yeah.
falls under Medicaid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have.
But you can disinherit a person, so they're not going to lose that portion to Medicaid. You're absolutely right. It is Medicaid.
Yeah, the whole concept is this. There's a 5-year look back. Medicaid says we'll pay the bill, put you in a nursing home, but not if you have money. If you have money, you got to spend your money first, and when your money's gone, they allow you to keep a certain amount, but when your money's gone, the state pays the bill, which is Medicaid. However, there's a 5-year look back. So right today, if I gave away all my money to Greg, both dollars, then 5 years from now, I'm broke. The state would pay the bill when I go in a nursing home.
Right.
And I can give my money to anybody. Makes no difference. But
Yeah,
you got
well,
a 5-year look back.
It makes sense. I mean, you someone that needs Medicaid, and if they all of a sudden transfer all their assets out
yeah.
to become Medicaid eligible.
And some people try to do that.
Yeah.
And they do. I've known of people that I have, and it didn't. And then they went to Medicaid, because Medicare is, what is it? If you're in the hospital and your Medicare runs out,
It doesn't run out.
Yes, it does.
No, it doesn't.
Yes, it does, Joe.
No, it doesn't.
I'll put money on it. I'm ready. Come on, bet.
How
It
much
does.
money you got?
As much as you want. Because
Come on, just hurry up
you
with
don't
your
have a
story.
lot, but you tell me.
I don't have a lot.
Okay, so I'm going to say, yes, there is a bet there. So once it runs out, then you have to be out of the hospital. You have to leave the hospital to renew it to start.
You see, that's not hospital. That's
That's like a
rehabilitative
rehab.
care. That is
Yeah.
not medical.
It's
It's
21,
rehabilitative.
21
Big difference.
days,
Big
right?
difference.
But you still have to leave. I mean, it can run out.
You got
Then you have
20
to go to
days.
Medicaid.
20 days automatically for rehab.
Right.
You
I
can
thought
get
it
an
was
extra.
six-
You can
no.
get an extra 100. Yes, and I'm just telling you, these are the rules. If the doctor says you're making progress, you can stay in a rehab paid for by Medicare. Now, if you are only custodial care, you're not going to get better. You're out to lunch and you're Italian. You're drooling.
It's kind of like me.
Kind of like Greg.
Yeah, and he's here working. That's
They
the problem.
say no. Medicare will not pay for custodial care, only for rehabilitation.
Right.
And up to 120 days max. 20 given, an extra 100 if a doctor says and attests to the fact that you're making progress.
Right.
Anyway, so what Victoria was saying was totally wrong, but I had to straighten her out.
Thank you. But I know that it does.
Wait a
'cause
minute.
I
now,
know of
can we
somebody
bet?
that
Can we
did.
bet now?
Yeah, I still want to bet because we're both right and we're both wrong.
Oh.
Technicalities.
Anyway, so the concept this leads us to another subject, Vic, that we were talking a little bit earlier about Medicare for everybody, which I personally am in favor of. Greg and I have talked about it for 10 years now, probably. Alan, we go on, and I have just been looking for, quote, an objective study to what it would cost to put everybody in America on Medicare, on our national health care program. Single payer, as they call it. Insurance companies don't like it, but still insurance companies would be doing supplements. Insurance companies would be doing HMOs, PPOs, the same thing they're doing
Right.
under Medicare today. So they wouldn't be gone, but it would make a dent in the insurance industry.
Trump really ticked off the insurance, big pharma, not insurance, but big pharma
Oh,
last
yeah.
week when he signed that foreign bill that if there are tablets, say in Australia, that are $6 and
Yeah.
they're selling for 600 here, they got to go for 6.
You know, the key thing is, and I can understand the other side of the coin. Research and development. America is the backbone of the world.
I understand R&D, but it's not that much.
It's not that much.
No.
There's got to be more oversight on this system than there is today, really simply. So what Trump does, he goes all the way for the jugular and cuts him off at the knee. Doesn't sneak up on him. he goes and, we got you bleeding bad, and if you want me to save you got 5 minutes.
He goes for the best possible scenario.
Yeah.
And then will accept
Oh, yeah.
what is reasonable.
Well, the
it's
art of
crazy.
negotiation is according to him, he's got it down to a science. Now, we all know he doesn't, but the bottom line is that's his strategy, is to throw enough stuff, hit it hard, get their attention, and then back off. Look what he's doing with China and trade. It's
China's economy is the worst that it's been in 27 years.
well,
That's good. Let them restructure and start over again. We all have bad ups and downs. What did we always say? Even when we fell so hard, we built it back up, and then we're better than ever.
is that
So
true? When did you get better than ever?
Last week.
But
Okay.
I love these politicians who say, well, people don't want to lose their private insurance. I mean, who on Medicare says, oh, I want to be on private, I want to be paying thousands and thousands every month for private insurance.
I get my conservative buds
It's
sitting
nuts.
around the pub yelling about, boy, this Medicare is terrible, and look at Social Security. And I said, let me tell you right now, guy, if it wasn't for Medicare and Social Security, you'd be living with your kids.
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's when you think what it cost Alan to keep you alive and what it costs to keep me alive. Us old people. And Greg, look at Greg. I mean, he's a mess to start
And
with.
I do not like the fact that these politicians are kicking around and calling Social Security
An
an
entitlement.
entitlement.
No.
Right.
Yeah.
We paid into
No,
it.
That's
we
our
pay for
money.
it.
We paid
Exactly.
into
And we
it.
doubled. We get tax doubled on it too.
And
The tax you coming in and coming out.
listen, we pay into Medicare.
But
a whole
our
lot.
money went away years ago
Oh, yeah.
in the Ponzi
Well,
scheme.
hey, it's the smoke and mirrors of government, printing money. What the big topic now? Are they going to extend the debt ceiling? Well, of course they are. What are you going to do? Shut down America? You're gonna have a fight every time it comes up, but then they're always going to extend it. 340-1590, 340-1590. So speaking of real estate, Vic, on the national media, they make it look like real estate's having problems.
It's crashing.
Yeah, I mean,
Well, it's not crashing, but I mean, if you look at just on a daily basis, we've slowed down. We have slowed down.
Yeah.
Even though people are still buying, they're
Right.
very particular about what they're buying, and what's happening here too is a lot of the sellers feel because of the media that their house is worth a lot more money than what a buyer feels. So then
Of
they
course.
get into
Nothing new
like
there.
a little war with that. But overall, and I keep saying this, we have lower prices than anywhere in this whole world you could ever go and buy. We have great products. There are people that are calling up and buying products that are from California and New York because they're so expensive there. When they see what we have to offer,
Oh, yeah.
they just tell the home inspector to go do a home inspection, and they're buying it sight unseen.
They don't even see it.
They don't because they are great values. Our problem is local people that have been here are spoiled.
Of course.
They come and see something that's up for sale because they want to move, and then they try to cut the prices so much lower than what it is.
Well,
And it's not going to work with a lot of our sellers because our sellers just are saying, forget it, I'm not going to give it away.
well,
Why do you think that's the case? Because there's a lot of retirees here. I mean, why would the home values be less?
In our area?
In our area.
Well,
yeah.
I feel because they always were. It's called a catch-up. Let's talk about an appraised value. I've got neighborhoods. When you do an appraisal, let's say a neighborhood, and you're in a gated community, and you've only had several sales in that gated community only because the people have been there since day one, and now they are dying off
Yeah.
because they've stayed there till they reached that age,
Right.
and we haven't had those high sales. They won't go outside of that development because there has been at least 3 sales, and the banks say, well, we have to use those,
But
and
you know,
that's not
there's a-
fair
there's a re-
because it's
there's a-
really worth more money.
But there's a
I see
real
what you mean.
simple rule in real estate. I hate to tell you. We have dirt that the house gets built on. If remember the price of dirt in Port St. Lucie was $1,500 a lot?
I couldn't give away
I do,
$500
We
lots.
couldn't give them away.
No.
Now, then they went to $3,000, then they went to $10,000, then to $30,000.
and then 100,000.
I mean, so what happens is the house costs $200 a square foot to build. So we build a 2,000 square foot house. We got $400,000. Then we got a lot. If the lot cost $100,000, we got $500,000. Well, guess what happened? When they talk about the land in California, it's $100,000 a square foot. I mean, so the price for the land is where it controls the price of real estate.
There's less land to sell.
Less land to sell, more demand. So the whole thing is this:
Supply
Florida.
and demand.
You want to? I'll give you an interesting, useless statistic. This is from back a few years ago, 1976 to be exact, and that is, if you took the entire population of the United States and put it in Florida, the density would be the same as Great Britain.
Interesting. I never heard that.
Well, if you go to Europe, and you've been to Europe,
Yes, many times.
Europe
Lenny
is
played in
packed.
the golf tournament.
I mean, the cemeteries, you're only allowed to stay in a cemetery for 5 or 10 years. Then they evict you and they add more people. They stack them 6 and 7 deep in one lot.
How many people are dead in that cemetery?
All of them.
Thank you.
Except for the visitors. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, if you go to places where there is no room to grow,
Yeah.
The price of land all of a sudden, go to Monaco.
Well, just go down to Fort Lauderdale, see what you can get for a couple $100,000.
Nothing.
Well, I get that all the time where they're advertising, and we're talking tear downs for
Yeah.
a couple $100,000.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, you see it up here happening. People are tearing down houses on the water and building new
Well, that's
houses.
because they're waterfront.
But the key is this. When you add together, we got real hard costs. What's it cost to build a house? And take a builder has to make 10%. So if it costs $200, he's going to make 20. And then you got to buy the land, and you got to pay the permit cost and the impact fees. And Vic, I mean, how many impact fees are there on a lot? Like $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000
Yes,
worth
it's
of cost.
12,000 and up,
12,000, yeah,
and up.
that goes to the city or county or both.
depending on what they need.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you're going to figure over 10,000.
And
for
then
sure.
if you're going to do a development, sometimes you have to pave a mile of road. Sometimes you have to pay, do all kinds of stuff.
Now, do those impact fees also have to pay the fire district?
Well, all of these.
Well, that's in your taxes also.
But also, whenever you pay impact fees, that money is divvied up by the county to fire and police and who cares where. But it's kind of the total budget. So they look at and say, hey, we got growth. We're going to have X number of houses this next year. That gives us X number of dollars. The rest of the money, Victoria and all the rest of the realtors have to pay, right?
Yes, that's right. We get it. We get hit. But if that house burns down or they tear that house down and you're going to rebuild on that lot, you never have to pay that impact fee again. It's
Yeah,
already paid.
that's true. Yeah.
So it's a
time.
one-time fee as an impact fee on that property.
So what happens is, of course, there's exceptions to every rule. But the bottom line was, Florida, well, one, we don't have this permafrost. You ever remember that word, permafrost?
No.
That's a northern word.
Yes, I remember it very well.
How deep was yours? Ours was 4 feet in Michigan.
Well, one year it was about 6 feet down.
Okay.
Wow.
You know what permafrost is, Vic?
I don't think I
Do
know
you know what
if I know that.
permafrost is,
Yeah,
Vic?
yeah, from
What?
Tahoe, Lake
What
Tahoe.
happened is,
yeah.
in certain climates, it stays frozen, period, at a certain depth down, and you have to dig down 4 feet to get into not frozen ground.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So then that means utilities, all kinds of stuff had to go below these permafrost lines.
Well, I know they talked about plumbing pipes before, and that's
Well-
probably what it was, so
well,
they wouldn't freeze.
That's another whole different problem, how houses are built. See, here's what happens. It costs more to build a house up north than it does down here. We don't have this frost problem. Florida has very few earthquakes.
Isn't that why they have basements up there?
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
Oh,
remember,
that's for parties.
you remember sump pumps? I mean, the whole different rule. But there's basements in Florida too, but very few, because we have a humidity problem.
A water problem.
You
And a
have
water problem.
Water for
You gotta
sure.
you gotta dig a hole in the ground to put a basement and pump all the water out constantly just so it doesn't flood your basement.
Well, you get a twofer, a swimming pool and a basement at the same time.
340-1590, 340-1590. But I know the mortgage rates are still unbelievably low.
But it still doesn't make a difference, Joe. You and I have experienced the highest rates that have ever been out there in
Right,
our world,
right.
and sold out projects in 8 weeks.
Yeah.
But it's price ranging changing. It's supply, demand.
Yeah.
What are people looking for? It's not always an interest rate, and they keep saying. Now, it's lovely to have an interest rate. When we said this, I mean, this is what our parents got years and years ago.
Right.
And we always said, oh my gosh, if we could only get what
Yeah.
our parents had, what we wouldn't do.
Well, back in early 80s, we used to say if it ever gets to 10%, we're going to be rich.
I know. And when we were doing, 16 and 18% back in 87.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So that's not always, I'm not seeing
That's not the only criteria.
No, it's not.
Well, another thing that's happening now is the price of rentals have gone up dramatically.
I don't know how people are going to live. People can't afford it.
It becomes difficult. Poor people, we talk about it all the time. Certain areas have priced themselves right out of the rental market. People can't afford in certain areas. So what happens is now all of a sudden the companies that need to hire people in those areas are having a problem finding people, and they're going to have to pay them more money. What a wonderful problem.
What a concept, right?
Well, this is Bill Clinton said this 10, 15 years ago. They were talking about the income inequality, where rich people made money and poor people didn't. And Clinton, they've never publicized this, said, that'll take care of itself. And the moderator said, how can that happen? He says, well, when unemployment gets very low, below 5%, the people at the bottom will get raises and the people at the top won't, because they have to keep their people. You have to pay more to hire a person.
Supply and demand again.
Supply and demand. Years ago, I would run an ad to get a person to work. I'd get 100 resumes. Now I'd get 5. I mean, it's called full employment means and you will, in order to keep a good person, you're going to pay them more money. Yeah. Except for attorneys, of course. You don't ever pay them.
I'd like to get back to a subject we talked about earlier, your Pennsylvania, Florida example with homesteading.
Right.
You said you have to live 2 years out of 5 to maintain your homesteading.
No.
No.
I'm glad you're paying attention. Almost.
He's talking about selling that
taxes.
property. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because the rule is this: you can sell your primary residence and pay no tax on the gain up to $500,000 if you're married. But you have to have lived in that house for 2 of the last 5 years in order to able to have this non-taxable event. Which, by the way, Bill Clinton is the one that instituted that.
Okay, that's where I was confused, because I thought, well, if you live in Pennsylvania 2 years, you live in Florida 2 years, can you have 2 homesteads? And you said no, but I didn't understand why not. But you were talking about taxes.
Right.
Okay.
Now, homestead gives you all kinds of different deductions and protections, which has got nothing to do with the government tax rule.
You just have to establish residency.
You have to
in Florida, and how do you do that? You driver's license and accounts and you move basically utility bills. You move everything to Florida.
Well, when people say establish residency, people say, "What do you do, Joe?" And I say, "Hey, look, first of all, if you got an electric bill and you bought license tags and you got a driver's license, you've established it.
You do the normal things that people
that's
do.
all.
Yeah.
And then you show that you're here. Now, if you go back and forth and you have electric bill here, electric bill there, driver's license here, driver's license there, and you got cars with plates in New York and cars with plates in Florida, you might be pushing the envelope. But you've got to only have one primary residence. There's people that are wealthy that have 6 and 8 and 10 homes. Pick one. And guess what? Most of them pick Florida.
Yes, they do.
Because Florida's laws for homestead are magnificent compared to... Remember the Enron boys?
Yeah. And it's not only that, it's the creditor protection.
That's my point. Homestead. Well, the Enron boys, before they got caught, they were buying and building palaces down in Palm Beach County, and the rule in Florida was a homestead can be up to 160 acres with 2 residences on it, exempt from attachment by creditors. So what you do, you're going to go bankrupt. So what you do is you get that all built and stuff, and this is not your intent, right, Greg? Because you're not your intent.
Oh, certainly.
Not your intent. And then you go bankrupt, but you get to keep your 160 and your 2 houses. I know. And let me tell you, the Enron boys got caught because they were building the houses, but they didn't quite make it.
Wow.
Too bad.
And then remember, add the portability that that Florida has on top of it for their homestead exemption for their taxable value.
And portability simply means you can move from one house to another and carry forward your tax exemption. And we're not going to give you the formula because it's difficult, each house. But if you talk to your county tax assessor, et cetera, and make sure you understand what's happening, then you can portable, that's not the right word, but you can port it.
Port it over. And I was talking to somebody the other day, and I guess she owned a home in Florida, and I don't know, and I'm going to check on this because remember what I told you, when you call there, you get somebody different every time.
Yeah.
But she hadn't owned a home in Florida for 2 years, and they're saying she lost her portability. And I'm not sure if that's accurate or not. I wouldn't think it would be. I would think you could still carry something because that would be part of it.
All you need to know is what the rules are. You know, I've often said this is like being Catholic. Don't ask questions, you just are one.
Yeah, but nobody knows the rules 100%.
But you have to find the rules.
I've tried 100 times.
Look at the Jesuits didn't even think they were Catholic, right, Greg?
There are a lot of Catholics who say that Jesuits are not Catholic.
Well, the Jesuits.
Oh boy, yeah. They're kind of.
They kind of set their own rules.
They do their own thing. Yeah. Yep.
Did I ever tell you why I went to that all-boys Jesuit prep school?
Because you were so bad.
No, there was a reason. We had a neighbor who had gone to Loyola of Chicago, and here I'm in St. Agatha's. My dad's paying $50 a year or whatever it is, back then. Mm-hmm. And this neighbor said to my dad, "You owe Joe a better education. He needs to go to this all-boys Jesuit prep school." My dad said, "Okay, no problem. How much is it?" He says, $1,500 a year. He goes, "You got to be out of your mind. That's half the price of a brand new Chrysler."
Yeah, back then.
Yeah. So he says he's going to St. Agatha's. Well, interesting story was, on a Sunday afternoon, we had this cottage out on a lake in the country, and my mother and brother conveniently were gone, and 4 priests from this Jesuit high school showed up at the cottage uninvited with a case of scotch.
There you go.
Which went on the kitchen table, and they proceeded to drink my old man under the table and preach to him what a crummy father he was. Well, the reason I went to that school was all of those priests could outdrink my dad, and he respected people that could outdrink him.
I think they were professors at Loyola UNLA, as a matter of fact.
You know, it was so
scary.
funny. But they all called to apologize, but they didn't mean it. You know, Jesuits only apologize if there's a purpose, right?
Of course.
3, 4. Anybody that went to a Jesuit education understands what Greg and I are talking about.
I think it's time for a new disclaimer that if anybody is offended by anything that is said on this show, it is not any of the human beings here. It is our new artificial intelligent robot.
Very good. Thank you. Gong, gong, gong. Anyway, 340-1590, 340-1590. So, literally, people are still moving into Florida like crazy.
Oh, they are. They're coming.
Rents are going up. People are buying. But, you know, and Vic, years and years and years ago, I used to have certain months when I looked at closings in real estate.
Oh, we
were
know
big.
what they are.
Yeah, but, you know, certain months, and we used to have, quote, big time season, which was January, February, March, April, and then May became a big month for closings because people would shop during the season.
February,
and
March
close.
were always our biggest
Yeah.
sales.
But then all of a sudden now, because we have such a monster local population, the rules have changed a bit, but still, look at all the New Yorkers and Californias and other states that are having a major tax problems that are relocating.
That's why they're calling from California in those
Yeah.
areas and just saying, I'm
Yeah.
buying. That's it. Now, the other thing is, when you talk about that, remember when people say they want an 1,800 square foot, that was a mansion in Florida,
Yeah.
1,800 square feet.
Yeah.
And when we got the first phone call that they were looking for a 4-bedroom house, we said, what? We didn't even have 4-bedroom houses.
Yeah.
We had 2-bedroom, 1-bath homes.
Remember
because
every-
they were retiree. Well, we've been selling for so many years. That's
Well,
our
Greg,
problem.
this is before you were here.
Yeah.
When General Development came in, they built a whole slew of 2-1s with a carport.
That's it.
Exactly,
That's
yeah.
all
Yep,
you would
that's
get.
right.
That
They'd
was-
sell them in the $20,000 bracket until they raised it to $74,000 and went to jail for lying.
Sold
on
by
law.
ladies in
Well,
bathing suits and Penn
If
Station.
you go down to West Palm now, to the old part of West Palm, you'll see
Polka-dotted bikinis?
one little house after another. I mean, it's just blocks and blocks and
Well,
blocks
you
of small
go
houses.
east of US 1 in Port St. Lucie, you see a lot of that.
Yeah, still
Absolutely.
smaller houses.
And then
yeah.
they would lock their doors because they'd leave for the summer always.
Yeah, right.
But like I tell people, since we got air conditioning in Disney, it changed the whole factor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And then younger people started coming in.
You know what I think has changed it too? The internet, because people from California and up north and
Well,
all,
it's a
they
whole
can
different
go
world
on
now.
Zillow
Education.
and just
I think
look
it's-
at what we have.
I think
for
it's
the,
really killed the
for the
market,
value.
though. I don't think it's
Do
been
you?
good for the market.
No.
Absolutely not.
That's
I
only,
mean,
that's, you're, hey,
I'm talking as a real estate agent.
Of course she is.
But not
Okay.
even just by that, because remember, as we talk here, and we're all professionals, and the reason we are is because we give that quality service.
Yep.
They don't get quality service, and I hear the horror stories that they get from just going on an internet also.
No, but I'm just
340
talking
I
about
understand the
the value,
exposure.
you know, the value of properties.
340-1590, 340-1590. My cord is all stuck back in here. Some producer we have over here, he's not even taking care of me, doesn't even care.
Your foot's on it.
Not that foot, the other foot.
I don't want to break it.
Oh, the other foot. Oh.
Hey, Mike, you're on the radio. It's Joe Martek. Thanks for calling in.
Going the wrong way.
Wait a minute. Now you're on it because our producer forgot to push the button. Hey, Mike, you there? Hey, good to hear from you, my man.
Mike, can you get on a better phone? Because
Or talk.
it is not good.
Well, now listen. I can hear you, but I don't know. Anyway, what happens? The volume is low, and it might be our producer's fault because he doesn't know how to turn knobs. But
Squad. I'm hearing the term squad.
squab.
To me, that brings to mind cheerleading.
What are you doing here, producer? You're making noise.
I don't
Trying
know.
to get
It's
some
his
volume,
phone.
we can hardly hear.
It's his
Can
phone.
barely hear.
What's your phone?
Do you remember the cheerleading squad?
Squad. I remember. I thought you said
Really
squab
squad.
like in chicken.
No, the squad.
Squad.
I'm hearing the term squad, and I haven't heard that in years. Evidently, there's some people that want to be president that believe they're part of a squad.
Oh, they're the 4-girl squad.
It's really amusing to me to hear. I wouldn't want to be termed as part of a squad looking to be the president.
Well, I will tell you what. It's an interesting thing, because you know the silent majority is not saying one word, but the Dems, they sure don't like the fact that all of a sudden our president is this monster racist trying to send back all these people where they're not from.
The one who has to be squirming.
From
Mr.
the U.S.
has to know that things aren't looking very good at this point. In my belief, she has to be worried. She's a pretty smart gal.
Yep. Hey, listen, other than that, everything else is normal. Your volume is extremely low, and it might be our
Yeah,
producer's fault.
No,
but
it's real low.
Yeah.
hey, Mike, thanks for calling in, my man. Talk
Thanks,
to us
Mike,
next
for
week and
calling.
use the kitchen phone.
Yeah, get off that Sports Illustrated phone that he's got.
Hey, I like the Sports Illustrated.
Sports
phone.
Illustrated.
Yeah.
Flip phone
340-1590, 340-1590.
with your NFL logo on it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Hey, we want the Betsy Ross flag, though. That's the thing I want.
Do you hear Limbaugh at all?
No?
He
But-
came up with the Betsy Ross T-shirt,
Did he really, yeah?
and apparently it's off the charts sales wise.
I'm sure.
And he's selling millions of these things.
You know
It's
what
like,
gets me
oh,
is
man.
how in the world somebody. Now, here's the power of this kid Kaepernick. He has become an institution. Now, I don't agree with anything he does, but he gets $7 million to not play football and to do a commercial. And then he comes up and says the Betsy Ross flag is racist. Right? Now, that was kind of a stretch, wouldn't you think, just a hair? Because Betsy Ross was a Quaker to start with, which was the most
It
passive
is the
thing.
most brilliant marketing campaign
It's all
Nike
marketing.
It
has
is
ever
marketing.
come up with.
That's what
really
Trump's
is.
doing right now. He's starting his election,
Of course he is.
re-election
Of course.
campaign.
Hey, what do you mean?
He's dividing. You know, he's
Let me just tell you.
telling the Democrats are socialists, they're
Well,
communists.
we know
and-
that. They're
and-
mostly attorneys.
Well, We got Alan here.
Alan, but he's not an attorney anymore. He's retired. He became a real person when he retired.
Is that what happened?
Did you? Did you become a real person?
I've never been a real person.
He can't be.
Greg,
He's a
Greg,
prosecutor.
let's talk on a totally different subject about our judicial system. This guy, Jeffrey Epstein, who the judge is now going to make a decision on Thursday whether he gets out of jail or not.
You think they're
I
going?
really, in my personal opinion, feel that it will hurt the justice system of this country if he gets house arrest.
Yeah, you would think so.
So we agree on that.
Because of his money, because of his influence with political people. You know, I mean, wasn't he caught with like a fake passport or something?
Yeah,
multiple fake passports.
How could you let the guy out?
Yeah.
He probably has a lot of pictures.
And he only had 20,000 pictures of kids, right?
Of all the politicians.
I could imagine.
You know,
I'll bet.
Can you imagine how many? Yeah.
Well,
Well, you know,
they
there are
just
a lot-
came out with a new tape with him and Trump.
Well, and there's
Did
a
you see
lot
that?
of
No,
there's
no.
a lot of
Yeah. Will. Hey.
stories now that, you know, because he says he was a financial advisor, but, you know, Tom Sullivan has talked about this on air for the last 2 weeks. He said, I did this for 20 years. There's no way one man can handle all those accounts by himself.
Impossible.
And so
Unless you're Bernie Madoff.
or unless the money was coming in because of blackmail.
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to see where that money
Oh,
came
that's
from.
interesting.
My
Oh,
God.
yeah.
As they dig into this thing, you know, this.
I bet you a lot of people are sweating right now.
I bet
I
they
would
are.
bet you are. You're right. I bet you this is Pulitzer Prize time for some investigative reporter if he can really start to pull
that
this.
lady at the Miami Herald. That if it wasn't for her
Right.
to keep this story alive,
Yeah.
it never would have happened.
Well, Victoria, you're the only lady in the room here. How do you feel as a woman?
You're assuming
if he would,
a lot.
If he would get out of
Well, Cliff just
jail.
came in.
Well, I don't think he should get out, period, whether I'm a woman or not, for all the things that he has done and knowing where he is. And if I was a judge or an attorney, I'd never let anybody out like that.
You know what I love about our
flick.
judicial system, and you know this, Greg.
No, what?
You're guilty until proven innocent.
You are guilty.
True.
I mean, that's
You are.
really.
I mean, you
in
get
spite-
tried.
Unless you're rich.
We're tried by the
By
media.
the public media, yeah.
Well, even if you're rich, you get.
Well,
you might have a lesser sentence.
I was going to say, it depends on who the judge is and whose pockets he's filling.
Well, all the above. All right, I think we're almost out of time. You're going to wave one finger, yeah, not a half a finger, right?
Not
how,
yet.
How much are we stretching these two fingers here? You know,
You get 45 seconds.
Ooh-wee, listen, scary. 340-1590, 340-1590. Haven't heard from Bulldog. Have you heard from Bulldog, Alan?
Yes, I have heard from Bulldog. He's still undergoing testing. We're all praying
And
for
they're
him.
chemo and radiation
Right.
too, right?
Right.
He's still in treatment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you guys, listen, I think we're winding down. We're bound to about 15 seconds. Victoria Loyd says goodbye. Alan says goodbye. Greg Fasula says goodbye. Joe Martek says goodbye. And we all say until next week.
Until
Thanks.
next time.
Bye.
Bye.
You've been listening to the Team Martek Hour. The Team Martek Hour is a paid program. The content was provided by the advertiser. WPSL, its staff, management, and ownership were not responsible for its content. Investment involves risk. Prior to making any investment, an investor should meet suitability requirements. Past results are not necessarily indicative of future performance. Neither the opinions expressed nor the information provided constitutes a recommendation to purchase or provide investment advice. The material presented is not a substitute for obtaining professional advice from a qualified person or firm. Securities offered through Centaurus Financial, member FINRA and SIPC. Tune in again next Wednesday at 11:05 for the Team Martek Hour here on WPSL 1590.
WPSL, Port St. Lucie.